We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Tuesday. Want to thank Ed for joining me yesterday. He was a big help. It's always interesting to listen to Ed. Somebody wrote me and said, Ed rocks, and I would have to agree. It's always an easy time for me to work with Ed because I worked with him for so long on radio. We kind of know each other's way of doing things, and it's easier than anybody else to bounce back and forth with him. So it's always fun to have him on. He'll no doubt be on this week as well. As you may know, I'm not in Minnesota where I normally am. I'm in Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, to be specific. That's why the video looks a little different. That's why the sound is a little different. The setup here isn't quite as good as what I have back at home, but I think I've got that fixed. I'm getting a new computer and some other stuff that I'll bring down here, and then hopefully we won't see much difference in quality in terms of the audio and the video next time around. Now, I come down to Savannah a lot. This is kind of like a second home. We've got a condo down here, and we've got it set up pretty much the way we want it. It's like coming home again. We love Savannah. It's a great time every time we come down here. The history, the culture, the food. Yeah, the food, there's a lot of it. But there's also some interesting things to see. Tybee Island, Hilton Head. But I have to tell you what we did yesterday. This is intriguing. My wife and I have done this before. My wife is like a lot of people who are really into the murder shows. You know what I mean? You know, the 2020, the Dateline, whatever, Keith Morrison. She loves all that stuff. And of course, for a time, there was the big story of the Murdaugh murders in South Carolina. But it just so happens all that took place about an hour away from where we are. So yesterday, we got in a car and went to Hampton, South Carolina, where the Murdaughs lived, up to Moselle Road, where their cabin was, up to the courthouse. We went to Beaufort, where all of this happened. It was a little, I don't know, for my mind, it was intriguing for my wife, but it was a little creepy for me. But if she's happy, I'm happy. And we did that. So I did a lot of screwing around yesterday. I think today we're going to go out to Tybee Island, which is a little more my speed. But all the while, we try to keep in touch with what's happening in the news. And there's always some interesting things happening. There's one story I wanted to impart to you. It just shows how desperate, dim-witted, diaper Donnie, dipshit Trump truly is. How stupid he is. Now, you might remember when he was president and doing all his crazy stuff, there was some talk about using the 25th Amendment to take him out of office. And it got close there, from what I understand, but it never happened. So Diaper Donnie is really intent on retribution to Joe Biden. He thinks that since Joe Biden is the president now, he should be going through all the same things that Donald Trump is going through. Why should I be accountable for the things I did and Joe Biden isn't accountable? Well, because Joe Biden didn't do anything and there's no evidence. On the other hand, for you, Donald Trump, there's all kinds of evidence. So therein lies the rub. Anyway, Donald Trump came out and said, why aren't the Republicans invoking the 25th Amendment to Joe Biden? They wanted to do it to me and they couldn't get away with it. Why aren't the Republicans invoking the 25th Amendment against Joe Biden? Now, see, here's where the stupidity comes in. There's only certain people that can invoke the 25th Amendment. One would be the president himself. You know, if he felt like he wasn't able to continue on or he was going in for a surgery where he'd be out for a little bit, it would be a temporary thing, the 25th Amendment. That's what happened with Ronald Reagan when he was shot way back when. So it's either the president or the vice president and members of his administration that could come together and decide to invoke the 25th Amendment. The Republicans have no option for that. They can't possibly do anything to kick Joe Biden out with the 25th Amendment. That's fucking ridiculous. That's stupid. And a former president of the United States, at the very least, should know that. But it just shows how desperate Donald Trump is. He'll grasp for fucking anything. And clearly he doesn't know anything. So he ends up looking stupid. The other thing I would say is he's not thinking about it either. He's not thinking too clearly. Let's say the Republicans could do something, invoke the 25th Amendment, and kick Joe Biden out of office. Well, then what happens? Well, then you got to deal with Kamala Harris because it goes right to the vice president after that. I don't think Donnie Trump thought this over because I'll be perfectly honest with you. If Joe Biden wasn't able to continue in office as president and Kamala took over, I don't think she's going to be a better friend to Donald Trump. I think she's going to be a lot tougher on Trump and the Republicans in general. So once again, Donald Trump illustrates how fucking stupid he is. And, the thing about it is he probably won't even be embarrassed. They'll tell him he's wrong and he'll just go on and make up some other shit. The guy is really shameless. He's pitiful. And as I said in a TikTok yesterday, I watched him on this Meet the Press interview, and he almost looks like an injured wild animal. He's got this weird look on his face. His face is all puffy. His eyes are all red. He's babbling. He's really not making sense at all. This guy's in trouble. And why people still want to follow him and stand behind him, I have no fucking clue. But when it's over and Donald Trump is totally destroyed, there's going to be a lot of people that end up looking pretty foolish. All right, let's get down to things. We do have some emails. This first one starts out, "Hey, Mike, although I'm not a baby boomer, I'm right on your tail as an elder Gen Xer born in 1965. Well, boomers go till 64, so you're just outside. I'm a young boomer, so I'm kind of in the middle too. I first saw you about a year ago on TikTok, shortly after my daughter sent me a funny pet video, and I signed up for TikTok, which I'd never used before. You had a sign or mentioned on the TikTok that you had a podcast, so I started to listen to it daily for about 9 months. Maybe put your podcast info on a banner on all of your content. It can't hurt. I have a suggestion for you. Since you are well versed in media editing and such, maybe you could string together some of your stories on your grandkids and string together some stories of your music industry escapades to fill an hour each. These stories are timeless and really don't need a current narrative. Maybe you can use them for your podcast on the rare times you're under the weather or just don't want to freaking do the podcast that night. Posting the rebroadcast of some top shows would work for me too, even though the content may not be completely current. The Red Hat cult would be interesting since I'm too lazy to look for it. I was going to ask to be on the podcast literally the day Jason from the city in the heart of Texas came on for the first time. After listening to him, there's no need to go on since darn near 85 to 90% of what he had to say were my views. I'm sure Jace and I will disagree on some things and some issues, like which side of town has the best non-gentrified tacos around. But that's about it. LOL. I appreciate all you do and every single guest you have on your show. And he has a Mexican or Hispanic wording. Unidos estamos, divididos seamos, I think. I don't know Spanish at all. But it says, regards, Matt R. from San Antonio. Well, Matt, I appreciate you listening for all this time. And don't think that you don't have something to add if you want to be on the show. Just because Jace is from Texas, you have a different perspective, and all the people out here want to hear that perspective. So instead of making excuses, fucking email me and say, I want to be on the show, because I'd love to have you on the show. I appreciate the kind words. And I think we'd have a lot to talk about. As far as doing the best of shows, I would love to be able to do that. But as you say, most of the shows I do are current after a week or so, and it would be hard to pick that out. As far as doing shows about the music business and my experiences there, or the radio business, I got some fucked up stories there too. Kind of funny stories, actually, and about my granddaughter. I'd love to do that. I just don't know if there's an appeal for that sort of thing. The one thing I notice when I do things on TikTok or podcasts, if I kind of go off track, people are interested for a while, but they're really here to get what they are used to getting. And I really feel like that's my responsibility, to give them what they expect. All too often, creators or podcasters will get a number of followers or viewers or listeners, and then they will think they can do just about anything, that they're so talented that they can do anything. Well, I'm not one of those people. I know better than that. People come to the podcast and to the TikToks, and they expect something certain, something they recognize. And I have no problem providing it, because when I do the TikToks or the podcast, everything I'm talking about does in fact interest me. So I've thought about that. The radio and the music business, and even my granddaughter, my kids for that matter, there's a lot of stories there. I'm kind of a storyteller. And I'd like to figure out a way to put them out. And I don't know if you just kind of sprinkle them here and there in the podcast with all the other stuff, or I do a separate podcast. I don't know. You folks think about it. Email me and tell me what you think. If you don't want to hear that shit and you just want to hear what we normally talk about, that's cool. I'm fine with that. That's kind of my mindset right now. I don't know that anybody would be interested, or enough people would be interested in that. But Matt, thank you. And by all means, email me. Let's get you on the show. Next one starts out, hi, Boomer. Just letting you know I really enjoy your podcast. Thank you. Great minds think alike. I love the fact that you have other listeners as guests on your podcast. I'm an independent voter. I used to hate both political parties. Then the creature known as Newt Gingrich, raised his evil head. Gingrich started with the lies and insults. Sarah Palin was next. Palin was septic tank comments or contents with a nice face. However, Palin became the hot look of GOP lies, insults, and extreme ignorance. Palin paved the way for a legion of demons, head demon Donald John Juan Trump. Trump is the most vile, evil, dumb, immoral, vindictive person ever to be president, though, in my opinion, hit in the face with a cast iron skillet, Puss in Boots DeSantis would be worse. Biden wasn't my first choice for president, but I will vote for him again. The alternative is disgusting. That being stated, the Democrats need to quit being pussies. The GOP got away with this. Usually the Democrats failed to address their lies. They need to address the GOP lies every day. I agree. You need to keep hammering that home. Schumer and Jeffries need to do this every day, not with hate, but with facts every day. And I think they both do a pretty good job with that. They're not too inflammatory, but they're good with facts. He says inflation, gas prices, DOJ lies, Biden's dementia, etc. The lies need to stop. And yes, Trump lives rent-free in my head, like Hitler, Pol Pot, Jeffrey Dahmer, child molesters, animal abusers, and other scumbags. It's called conscience. Keep up the good work, Mike. We need more good guys like you. Respectfully, Patty. Yeah, thank you, Patty. I appreciate that very much. I think you're right. Newt Gingrich was the start of the start of what we see in the Republican Party now. Win at all costs, lie if you need to. And I think you're right about Sarah Palin. She was the next step. And I think what she brought to the whole recipe was the stupid. I mean, this woman was clearly stupid. I feel bad for John McCain, and I'm surprised that John McCain agreed to make her a vice presidential candidate. She had no business doing that. She wasn't bright. She was Donald Trump with a pretty face at the time. Have you seen her lately? Uh, age age hasn't done well by her. Anyway, the point is that uh, that's when you got unserious people in the Republican Party, and with these unserious people, you get stupid behavior. And we see it now with the likes of Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, Kevin McCarthy, for that matter. There's a lot of stupid running around Washington, D.C. with the Republican Party. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. People have come to me and they say, Trump lives rent free in your head. And what you have to understand is he doesn't really live rent free in my head. I don't think about him all the time, but I understand who he is and what needs to be done to be rid of him. He's like a pest. He's like roaches. If you don't stay on top of it and keep pounding on them and keep spraying them, they will keep coming back. I think that's what we have to consider with Donald Trump. People will say, are you still talking about Donald Trump? Yeah, I'm talking about Donald Trump because he's still in the mix. He's still controlling the Republican Party. He's still a problem. He's stirring people up, possibly creating some violence. Those of us that talk about Donald Trump between now and 2024, we have to get louder. We have to get more obnoxious about this. Republicans have been known to control the narrative by doing just that. So we need to beat them at their own game. You know, it's funny. I will talk to Democrats and they will make a comment about something and they will believe it, like Trump could win in 2024 or he won't get convicted. Now, the only reason people would say that is because they're hearing it. But who are they hearing it from? They're hearing it from Donald Trump and Republicans. I'm telling you this right now, Democrats, you got to stop listening to those fuckers. And by all means, don't fucking believe them. They're known to lie, pathological lies. The only reason Democrats are afraid now is because they believe what they hear. Look at the facts. You don't think Donald Trump's going to get convicted because Donald Trump says he's not going to get convicted? Well, he's got 91 felonies against him. The prosecutors that have these 91 felonies have a conviction rate of 98 to 99%. So are you telling me you think there's any chance that he's going to run the table and beat all 91 felonies? There's no way. It's not possible. And the fact of the matter is we only need one or two to find him guilty and he's fucking done. So stop with the fear about, oh, he's going to get away with it. He's not getting away with it. You can see it on his face that even he knows he's not going to get away with it. So you got to stop listening to Republicans. They carry the narrative a lot of times because they speak the loudest and the longest. That's why if Donald Trump lives rent-free in my head and am I still talking about him, you're fucking right. I'm going to keep talking about him. I'm going to keep pushing this narrative until he's done and can no longer speak. When you're dealing with a sick wild animal, which is what he appears to be, or a bully, if you leave a breath in their bodies, it will come back to haunt you. You got to make sure he's done and out for good. And we have to do that with Donald Trump. As long as he has any voice in the news and in politics, he's dangerous. Frankly, he's dangerous. All right, this one comes from Craig, and this one didn't come from email. This came off the podcast website. He said, I just came across a TikTok that said, a lawsuit was filed in your home state of Minnesota to get human manifestation of circus peanuts off the presidential ballot in all 50 states. I would love to hear your take on this. Thanks for your putting on a great podcast. I listen every morning on my way to work. Craig. Well, thank you, Craig. And that's an interesting description of Donald Trump. Actually, when I read it the first time, I thought you were talking about Minnesota passing a law against circus peanuts. I'm going, oh, fuck's sake. What kind of nutcase do I got here? And then I read it again and I realized you were just describing Donald Trump and aptly describing Donald Trump, quite frankly. Yeah. The state of Minnesota, I talked about this in a TikTok. The state of Minnesota is, I think, suing the Secretary of State to make sure that Donald Trump's name isn't on the ballot. Now, if he isn't on the ballot in Minnesota, I don't know that that does a lot of good because it's a blue state. They would have never voted for Donald Trump, so he doesn't lose much in terms of electoral votes. However, it does start the process. People will appeal it, and they'll appeal it up to the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court sides with these people in Minnesota, well, that will start a domino effect of other states going, well, Minnesota did it. Fuck yeah, let's take them off the ballot. We get a couple of red states that do this. Well, Donald Trump is fucking done. I'll be honest with you, I don't get that excited about this 14th Amendment because I don't think it's going to be necessary. It'd be nice to have in our back pocket should we need it. I just don't think Donald Trump's going to make it through the primary into the election in 2024. He's got too much shit going on and it's wearing hard on him right now. That said, I'm very proud of Minnesota because Minnesota is leading the way with a lot of liberal issues and bills, getting free lunches for kids, codifying Roe v. Wade, putting restrictions on gun ownership, legalizing marijuana. They did a lot of shit this past year with only one seat majority. So a lot of credit goes to Governor Walz and the Democrats in the legislature in Minnesota. Now, that said, there are other states that are trying to do the same thing that Minnesota's trying to do. I think Michigan and I think Florida started to do it, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So you only need one state to take it up the chain to the Supreme Court and then ultimately get him taken off the ballot. Then that will create kind of an avalanche of other states saying, well, precedent has been set, so we want to take him off as well. We'll see what happens. Next one says, Dear Mike, apologies in advance if this is long and rambling. I've thought about writing for some time, but keep changing the topic as I also overthink things. Well, long and rambling. We get a lot of long and rambling emails. And fact of the matter is, it doesn't bother me in the least. I think the listeners need to be as involved in the podcast as I do. And so I'm happy to get any emails, let alone short emails or even the long rambling one. You all have something to say and I want to hear it. So fuck it. Just send me an email. If it's a long one, I'm still going to read it. Anyway, this emailer goes on to say, I love listening to your podcast at night as I try to combat insomnia and fall asleep. Your calm disposition and voice are a comfort in this time of instability. Thank you. When I hear you say T-Rump will not succeed in winning the next election, hold on a second here. I've got a computer here that's not my favorite computer, and it makes it hard to go through this thing. Anyway, now we continue here. When I hear you say T-Rump will not succeed in winning the next election and that he will indeed be held accountable for at least some of his crimes, I feel better. And I feel strongly about that. There's no way he can win the election. And if a Republican or Donald Trump himself wanted to debate me on that, I guarantee I could win it because the facts will bear out. And he will be held accountable. As I said before, he's got 91 felonies. No way he runs the table on that stuff. There's just no fucking way. Now she goes on, I think it's a she goes on to say, this may sound simplistic, but I've noticed that the issues Democrats are behind, such as affordable health care, child care, supporting women's rights to decide for themselves about their reproductive health, assuring that school children don't go hungry, and that they can choose any book in the library to learn are not things backed by big money in the same way that the NRA backs keeping guns accessible to all, without cluttering things up with silly background checks or red flag laws. Maybe it's not as much of a big money issue as it is the strength and power they have over the GOP and the rabid followers of the former guy and the abomination called the 2025 Project. Unless I'm missing something, and that's always a possibility, there's no big profit to be had in assuring women have the right to choose, with the possible exception of drug makers. Libraries, again, no big profit claim to take advantage of. Who makes big money off feeding school children? No one I can think of. If there was big money to be made, the right-wing billionaires would find a way to capitalize on it, and it would be an important issue to protect. Does this sound ridiculous? No, it doesn't sound ridiculous. Where I'm going with this line of thinking, I don't know for sure. I do know that pharmaceutical industry has a stake in promoting the drugs they want to sell because they're profitable. The medical-induced abortion drugs must be expensive, or if they are made less accessible, they will cost more to offset their losses. It just doesn't seem to me that anyone with huge influence is as loud as the ones who want to decide for us that they want our futures to be. I get your point. If the conspiracy if the conspiracy-fueled Freedom Caucus and billionaire-funded get their way, we could be looking at a future that looks like Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale: forced birth, all men, white, making and enforcing laws, not allowing women in positions of power or decisions making, not educating women, keeping the poor poorer and the uneducated, a classist, racist patriarchy, allowing one way to worship Christian Taliban, as Michael Flynn has described. Now, mainstream media tells us the same news stories over and over, painting a grim picture. If you listen to any of them, left-leaning outlets tell us how horrible it will be if the whole right wing gets its way, and how hard Donald Trump is trying to make all his legal troubles disappear. And Fox Faux News tells its listeners how horrible the former guy is being treated, persecuted, to use his words, and how awful the Democrats are. There are otherwise rational, intelligent, educated people who listen to that trash, including my brother, who was an MD, a psychiatrist no less, who should be able to see how off the rails T-Rump is, but insist that he did a good job. The economy under him was great, and we should have finished the wall. There's no talking rationally with him, so I don't try. Trump reversed all the environmental protections businesses and factories had to follow because, well, it's bad for business as it costs too much to implement and causing them to lose money. They ain't losing money. They just want to make more money. People like my brother who listen to Fox don't believe the climate crisis is real. I like Joe Biden. I think he's done an amazing job given the hurdles he's had to overcome. I know people say he's too old, but who else has come forward on the Democratic side to oppose him? No one. Is it because no one wants to take on crazy Republicans? I think since he's gotten the treatment for sleep apnea, President Biden seems more present, brighter, and more engaged. I know from having had it that one can always seem out of it from sleep deprivation. Do you think we need another option? It's interesting. I did a TikTok about that, and we'll talk about that in a second. Have you not heard, thankfully, any more about a third party hoping the plan to drain the votes from undecided voters away from Joe Biden has died a quiet death? Thoughts on that? I do have some thoughts on that. First of all, I said the third party was never going to be a thing. There's not enough money out there. If they want to survive and make some noise, they need some support and they need some money, and they ain't getting any. They aren't getting any money, so they'll fade away, as I suggested. In terms of Biden being the choice for president, I suppose something yesterday because when Joe Biden won the presidency in 2020, he said something very interesting. He said that he would be a transitional president. What's that mean? Now, to me, that meant he was going to serve one term and then make way for younger people. I think Joe Biden had that plan all the way. It made sense. I mean, he's going to be 82 years old. Does he really need to run another 4 tough years as president? Why not relax and rest during your golden years instead of putting yourself through all that shit? Well, I think the reason he ended up running had nothing to do with ego or power or anything like that. I think what it was, that Donald Trump didn't go away. Joe Biden was the one president or one candidate that could beat Donald Trump, and in fact did. He probably figured, like a lot of us figured, that once he became president, started doing his job, Donald Trump would fade away and he could do what he needs to do and make way for somebody younger. But that's not what happened. Donald Trump stuck around, still made noise, and he's still causing problems in this country. So I think Joe Biden decided he needed to fucking run again just to shut down Donald Trump if necessary. I don't think it'll be necessary, but at this point, there might be better choices to run for president in 2024 that happen to be Democrats. But here's the deal: Joe Biden is an incumbent. It's hard to beat an incumbent. To bring somebody up and try to build them up and try to make them a candidate, that's hard to do, even if they're good candidates. Now's not the time to do that. We've got to win the 2024 election. First and foremost, that's the deal. Now, what happens after the 2024 election and Joe Biden gets inaugurated again, anything could happen. Maybe Joe only makes it 2 years, then Kamala gets to be president. I'm cool with that. She's younger, she's tougher, probably meaner than Joe Biden. She's not as learned as Joe Biden, but I think she'll do a fine job. There's really no other option than having Joe Biden run for president in 2024. I mean, you even saw Gavin Newsom. Everybody was trying to push for him to run for president, and he said no. He said no, it's not my time, and that was the right decision to make. That was the absolute right decision to make. So, yeah, I don't think we'll see anybody, short of something dramatically happening to Joe Biden, say he gets sick or passes away or something like that. Then there'll be a lot of shuffling around and rushing around trying to get him replaced. But I think at this point, as long as he's healthy, it's not going to happen. I would prefer a younger president, but if not, let's just get the win in 2024 and then we'll worry about that shit later. All right, the email goes on. Then there are all the labor strikes happening. It's not just the auto workers, but teachers, nurses, the writers, and screen actors. Has U.S. ever had as many worker strikes going on at the same time? Not sure. Maybe back when they first started. Supposedly our economy is doing great and unemployment is at an all-time low. Why are there so many people not being paid enough to live on? Well, when you look at what's going on with these strikes, I tend to look at it like this. This country is going through some changes. We were dealing with a lot of shit with Donald Trump. But that shit didn't start with Donald Trump. That shit was just brought to the surface by Donald Trump. So we may owe him a debt of gratitude for that. I think people are getting sick of the rich getting richer and the poor or the middle class just getting by. I think we may be looking at kind of a subdued revolution in terms of workers and big corporations. People are getting tired of that shit. I go to work every day. I pay a third of my money in taxes at least. I barely get by. Then I get up in the morning and I do it again. People are fucking tired of that shit. That's got to change. And I think these unions might be the start, as I said, maybe a revolution. And I'm not talking about fighting. I'm just talking about people just saying, "I fucking enough. I'm not going to work for you unless you treat me like a fucking human being." And that's going to cause some problems on the higher levels, but they need to be shook up. They need to start paying people what they deserve to be paid. Anyway, she goes on, why are so many people not being paid enough to live on? Because we got greedy fucks running companies. I expect the large corporate-owned hospitals are to blame for nurses not being paid or staffed sufficiently. But what about teachers? Yeah, what about teachers? They don't get paid. I'll be perfectly honest with you. There is a shortage of teachers right now, and I said that would happen 3 years ago. Right now, the Minneapolis public schools where I once worked, where my wife once worked, school has started and they're short 200 to 300 teachers. Well, that's not good because there's a lot of kids not getting the attention they deserve. The public education system is in rough shape. Betsy DeVos did nothing to help that. No, of course not. She was about money. Parents and schools are at odds with each other about other curriculum, banning books, and gender issues. Most parents wouldn't have a clue how to put together a well-rounded study program designed to help the majority of our youth to be prepared to become a productive member of society. Agreed. No, they wouldn't. And you know, that's the problem that we have here is that schools are afraid of parents, and now parents are controlling the school districts, and they ain't doing a very good fucking job. The public schools are a fucking mess right now, and a lot of changes need to be made if they hope to survive. Where are all the new employment and work-related education opportunities opened up by the agreement to build computer chips and electric engines? We need to get less dependent on fossil fuel and on importing them from other countries like China. I think the Biden administration could do more in touting their achievements. However, they could be preaching to the choir. How to get the conservatives to take their earplugs out and listen. Well, the problem isn't earplugs. The problem is who they're listening to. I mean, that's what our media is doing. They're dividing us. Depending on who you are and what you listen to is what you know. Like I've said before, I've talked to Trump-lefucks before, give them facts that are pretty obvious and pretty well known, and they will say to me, I never heard that, because they never heard that. They're listening to places that don't give them that much information. Our media is a big problem. And hopefully people like me and you and we get out here on the podcast and the TikToks and we inform more people. Hopefully that does some good. It's unfortunate that we have to take that mantle up, but somebody's got to fucking do it. It may or may not work, but at least we're trying, you and I alike. And she goes on to say, last but not least, if the 2050 project were to become reality, they'd probably dismantle and redirect the funds from Medicare and Social Security. I just turned 69 and plan to retire next year. Of course, if that plan were to go in effect, there would be a huge number of people like me back out looking for employment to sustain themselves. There are days I feel scared, helpless, and hopeless. Your podcast is my go-to every night. Thank you for making the term boomer okay. Again, Obi-Wan, you're my last hope. Thanks, Mike, Crazy Cat Mom, Portland, Oregon. I don't know what the correct pronunciation is, but I'm sure I pissed somebody off by mispronouncing it. Well, here's the deal. The whole thing with the Social Security and the Medicare, they started telling me that that was going to go away when I was in my 20s. You'll never get Social Security or Medicare. It's not going to go away. As much as the Republicans wanted to or keep talking about it, do you think overturning Roe v. Wade caused a stir and caused them to lose elections? Holy fuck, they do that to Medicare and Social Security. Even the Republicans will strike out against them. They will fight back on that. They're not going to tolerate that shit. That's not going to happen. This is just the fear that media tries to tell you so you get worked up and continue to watch what they're doing, you know? I don't worry about that. As far as the 2025 project or the 2050, I don't know which one it is, but I know what you're talking about. It's this draconian plan that the Republicans have when they get power. I think it's the 2025 plan that's assuming they get power in 2024's election. Let me tell you something. They aren't going to get power in 2024. They're going to lose the presidency, they're going to lose the House, and they're going to lose the Senate. I don't say that as I'm trying to be hopeful. I don't say that because I've got some fucking crystal ball. The facts suggest that. They didn't win in 2020. They didn't win in 2022. And in 22, it was largely because of Roe v. Wade. That's also going to be an issue in 2024 with all the other shit, the investigations and the trials and the convictions. They're not going to win in 2024. That 2025 plan is just going to die because after the Republicans lose in 2024, they're going to be freaking out. They should have been freaking out 2 years ago after 2022, but it takes a while for them to grasp things, apparently. But what's going to happen is when they get wiped out in 2024 and there's a blue wave, what's going to happen then is they're going to have to step back and rebuild and reimagine and rehabilitate the Republican Party. What they're suggesting in that particular plan isn't going to work, and it will be apparent to them that it's not going to work after the 2024 election. Again, this is something that people put out there to make you worry. Don't worry about that. There is no logic that says that's going to happen. The Republicans aren't going to win in 2024. The plan will never be implemented, and it will go by the wayside as the rest of the Republican Party will have to change everything about what they're doing, not only because of the election, but because the voters will start to become millennials and Gen Zs, and 65 to 70% of them don't vote Republican. They're going to have to try to appeal to the younger people or just fade away and die. You don't need to worry about that shit. That shit's not going to happen as much as people want to tell you that it's going to happen. All right, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Well, believe it or not, I got more emails. I swear there's going to be a day when the whole show is nothing but emails, and that's cool. I like to hear what you want to talk about and what your concerns are and educate me many times with things I don't know or haven't heard. All right, the next email goes like this. Mike, a thought for your listeners who are bombarded with decisions and choices about the future of this great nation. And in quotes, he says, if it looks like a duck, he goes on to say, oddly enough, with most things, the mental math is easier and less complicated than we make it. I agree. What's it called? Occam's razor? Whatever is the simplest answer is usually the answer. For example, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. The famous test is an example of abductive reasoning. It is a form of logical interference that seeks the simplest and most likely conclusion from a repeated or sustained set of observations, basically firsthand observations of what was said, what was done, or what behavior was observed. The simple test implies that we can identify an unknown subject by observing the subject's habitual characteristics. It can be used to counter perplexing arguments that something is or is not what it claims to be. In fact, logic and reasoning are actually helpful versus limiting ourselves to fewer sources, referencing an ambiguous topic or person. And I agree with you. Sometimes if somebody speaks vehemently or articulately, or they look right, you tend to believe them. But you shouldn't. I mean, that even includes me. You should check everything before you make a decision on something. Just because I say it, just because Donald Trump says it, doesn't make it so. Find out yourself. And that's really what we need to do in this country is get more people interested in facts and logic and use it. Don't be swayed by people who are good talkers or are loud and obnoxious. For whatever reason, they get a lot of people believing them. He goes on to say, for example, this famous quote from the 1939 movie The Wizard of Oz: "Oh, pay no attention to the man behind the green curtain." The subject of ambiguity was the wizard, who insisted no one should look behind the curtain, when in fact the best course of action for clarity and transparency was to look behind the curtain. Absolutely. Now, I don't mean to be insulting, demeaning, or sarcastic. I do mean to remind us of one of the oldest and most reliable tests to help us sort out the antics of the many mind-numbing politicians, news media outlets, talking heads, so-called church leaders, grifters, and anyone stumping for our resources, time, and attention. If it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it probably is a duck. I couldn't agree more. If they lie like a liar, supports liars, and repeats lies from liars, then they're probably liars. Exactly. If they fail to deny their failure, support those who fail, and repeat antics from failures, then they're probably failures, aka Donald Trump. I added that. If they don't practice what they preach, if they preach false teachings and they support those who do the same, then they are probably false preachers and teachers. If they keep or misuse monies they grifted, if they misrepresent how these monies were used and support others who do the same, then they are probably fake, fraudulent grifters, not worthy of our resources. If they break the law like a criminal breaks rules that apply to them and cover up for those that do the same, then they're probably criminals. If they don't have respect for basic human rights, ignore those in need while supporting the affluent, oppress others for personal gain, then they probably are self-centered and self-serving, not worthy of our attention. If they are funded by the wealthy, embrace their agendas of the lobbyists, and promote plans and programs that benefit the prosperous minority, then they probably are in the pockets of the agenda-driven rich and powerful. If they don't support justice for all, ignore injustice in policing, courts, healthcare, financing, voting, education, and endorse others who do the same, then they probably should not make policy for a nation that promotes liberty and justice for all. We can pick at this correlation scab all day. We could go on and on with this, but you get the point. Sometimes our own instincts, based on our firsthand observations, are the best source for sorting out truth from false narratives. Remember, ducks act like ducks, quack, quack. Keep up the good work. Take care, KCT. And I appreciate that, KCT. You're absolutely right. And that's kind of the essence of what we do with the Rational Boomer. It's about being rational, looking at logic, looking at truth and facts over lies and bullshit. Unfortunately, Republicans, I won't say that they're hoodwinked by these lies, but they serve them well, so they stick to them. They know they're lies, but they continue to push those lies because they will benefit from them. It goes back to what you said, KCT. These people are criminals. These people are grifters. If they look like it, well, then they are. The problem here is, I think we Democrats get it. I think we understand that. We talk about it all the time here on the Rational Boomer podcast. It's those 35%, the base. They either can't grasp it or they just don't care because they only want to win and they're too stupid to understand that they're supporting something that's against their best interest. And I don't know what you do with that. I mean, there's the old phrase, you can't fix stupid. And unfortunately, it's true. There are people that are gullible and stupid, and they will follow anybody that talks loud and says what they want to hear. When we deal in politics, there's so many people that say what we want to hear. But what do they do? I mean, it's one thing to say what you want to hear, but their actions should tell us who they are. But instead of calling them out, we just believe what they say. And that's ridiculous. That's fucking bullshit. And we can't have that anymore. KCT, thank you for the email. I think it's important for people to understand that. Let's not make this more complex than we have to. And you know, that's kind of the essence of the way I do things. You know, people will always say to me, well, you break it down and you understand, it makes me understand what's going on and I'm less nervous. Well, I've done that for myself all my life, and I do it because I need things in simple terms. I need things that I understand because I don't trust most people. And I don't mean that in a mean way. It's not so much that I don't trust them and I'm afraid of them. It's just that when somebody tells me something, I have this need to know exactly what the truth is. And if I don't think I can get it from that person, I'll find it some other way. And that's kind of what I do with the Rational Boomer. All right, the next one is Old Soul. The last two emails. One's an email, one was on the website. She starts out, hey, Boomer, have you seen the latest Republican fake outrage? The U.S. Senate did something so egregious that it's a top priority for Republicans. It's more important than a government lockdown, domestic terrorism, inflation, negotiating prescription drug prices, and it's even more important than common sense gun laws to stop children from being slaughtered in schools. This is such an important issue that today they talked about it more than they did the Biden crime family and Hunter Biden's laptop. The U.S. Senate changed the dress code. Not only are they upset about the dress code change, but they are losing their mind saying John Fetterman is the reason for the change. Well, you know, they got to have decorum. Marjorie Taylor Greene has said it many times. That bitch doesn't even know what decorum means. Anyhow, Old Soul makes a good point. She says she just saw Maria Bartiromo giving an interview with a Republican senator, can't remember his name, that had the nerve to say, how's one person allowed to get away with disgracing the office? He's bringing down the tradition of standards of the Senate. You mean like Marjorie Taylor Greene calling Lauren Boebert a little bitch? Well, clearly she was right there, but again, we're talking about decorum. She goes on to say, where's the outrage over Tuberville holding up military promotions? Isn't he the one single-handedly weakening our military and recruitment? Absolutely. The crazy part about what's going on is they're saying it with a straight face. Their audience can't be that stupid to think that's more important than anything else. The U.S. is currently dealing with. Not only that, but didn't the people of Pennsylvania elect him knowing he's not a stiff and dressed casual? Yeah, what's more important than what the people of Pennsylvania wanted? They elected him, they hired him. Now, Fetterman ran his entire campaign in jeans and a hoodie, literally. I'd say the Republican Party has lost it, but I don't think they ever had it. The culture war nonsense and attacking Democrats to distract from the fact that they are a bunch of buffoons is played out, and they need to come up with some new material, unable to government with their platform, and they will help American people. Personally, I don't care if Fetterman showed up wearing a Speedo and flip-flops, as long as he's fighting to stop fascism. Fascism America from taking over this country, better health care and living wages. Who cares? The shameless Republican Party is flabbergasted. Thanks, Boomer, Old Soul. She makes a She makes a good point, and this is what the Republicans do. They told us that they would come and bring down inflation and bring down gas prices, and all they've done is gone after Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. And it's all been to no avail because there is no evidence, there is no witnesses. So you'd think they'd stop and do something more productive as members of the House and the Senate for that matter. But they don't. They keep holding on to that. You have to understand what the Republican Party is. Their only real strategy in terms of elections is owning the libtards, making the libtards look bad. They did it in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. They tried to do it in 2020 with Joe Biden, the Ukraine dirt that they never found. And now they're doing it with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, even though they've been looking into this for 5 years and they have yet to get any evidence. The Republican Party is an unserious party. They're just trying to play, it reminds me of when I was in middle school. It reminds me of the game we used to play, Bombardment. All they want to do is hit a Democrat and knock them out. Unfortunately, they're unable to even do that. They have no policy. They accomplish nothing. And when 2024 comes around, the Democrats are going to point out, so you had control of the House, what have you done? And the fact of the matter is they haven't done jack shit. So yeah, it's pretty ridiculous that they're worried about a dress code when they've got Marjorie Taylor Greene asking for decorum and she calls a fellow representative a little bitch, and then that little bitch ends up going to a theater and gets caught groping her boyfriend in the middle of the event, vaping and acting obnoxious and saying, "You know who I am?" Yeah, you motherfuckers don't know what decorum is. You don't understand the definition of decorum. So the audacity of you complaining about a fucking dress code. Let's not worry about a dress code. How about we have a rule in the Senate that you don't fucking lie anymore? That would be nice. Or how about that you don't just try to obstruct the other party and you actually get things done? I don't care if you all came in t-shirts and Bermuda shorts, as long as you got something done. But unfortunately, you're incapable of doing that. So Old Soul, you're right on track. Thank you for that. And then she wrote this on the webpage. Hey, Boomer, did you see Trump is having a rally in Michigan to speak to the auto workers on strike? A couple of weeks ago, he said people should not unionize and not pay their union dues because Biden will send all their jobs to China. Do you think he has the balls and, quite frankly, the stupidity to say that to the workers' faces? On one hand, I think he will, but on the other, I don't think he will. What do you think? Thanks, Old Soul. I think what he'll do there is whatever he can do to try to get votes or try to get support or try to get money. That's all he's going to fucking do. He will say things and then go on Meet the Press or some other interview or in a rally, and people say, well, what about this? And he'll just say, I never said that. This is where I have the problem with Donald Trump. A lot of people think he's smart. A lot of people think he has a strategy. And frankly, he's one of the dumbest human beings I've ever listened to. He just says whatever he needs to say at the moment, whether it has anything to do with what he said before. He will lie and say he's never said it. In fact, all the Republicans do that. He will go there and try to rally the troops and try to get support and try to get money and try to get votes. But I can't honestly believe that anybody would take him seriously. Well, we know there will be some people that take him seriously, but not enough. I don't know what he's going to do, but I know I had hopes and dreams for the Meet the Press interview, and it was all pretty much the same. The only good part of it is he implicated himself even more. So if nothing else, at the rally, he probably implicated himself more. His lawyers have to be losing their shit. Now, you want to talk about stupid. Donald Trump has often said nobody was better for Israel and the Jewish people than Donald Trump as president. You want to know what he said yesterday? Donald Trump marked the start of a Jewish high holy days with a fiery missive on Sunday. And this is what he said. He reminded his followers that liberal Jews voted to destroy America and Israel through their support of Joe Biden. So now what he's doing is he's been the one guy that's been the most favorable to Jewish people, but now he's admonishing them because they had the audacity to vote for somebody who wasn't a criminal. Trump took to his Truth Social platform to wish Jewish Americans a happy new year and Rosh Hashanah. Just a quick reminder for liberal Jews who voted to destroy America and Israel because you believed in false narratives. This is what he wrote on Truth Social. Let's hope you've learned from your mistake and make better choices moving forward. Happy New Year, Trump concluded. Now, the post, hold on a second here. I'm having trouble with this this computer because it's not a computer I normally use. So as I'm scrolling, it goes down too far, it goes back up, and so I apologize, but fuck it. Now, the post included a pro-Trump flyer from an anti-democratic lobbying group that ironically called the former president one of the greatest anti-Semites of our time. And he used material from this group. This group acknowledged that Donald Trump is not only an anti-Semite, but one of the greatest anti-Semites of all time. Yet he tells us he's the one person who's done the most for the Jewish people. The message points to Trump's effort to move the American embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a controversial shift in U.S. policy at the time, as well as other pro-Israeli policies. The flyer was made by Jexit. You wonder what that means. What do you think the JE stands for? I'm thinking Jewish. A Florida-based group that hopes to educate Jewish Americans that the Democratic Party has abandoned them, and Israel according to the Times of Israel, which is absolutely ridiculous. You think they're going to convince them? I don't fucking think so. Trump has complained about levels of political support from Jewish Americans before. Last year, he told Jewish voters to get their act together and said no president has done more for Israel than himself. Well, the only thing he's done is attempted to move the embassy to Jerusalem. I never understood why that was a big deal, but I don't happen to be Jewish, and I'm not the smartest motherfucker in the world. But there's a lot of other things you could do for the Jewish people and for Israel. And if that's the only thing you did, well, I'm sorry, I'm not impressed. All right. Now, talk about somebody I'm not impressed by and somebody who's an absolute fucking fool. Former Justice Department Civil Division head Jeffrey Clark, who is accused of helping Trump to try to force states to delay the certification of the 2020 presidential election under false pretenses, is almost certain to fail in his bid to get his charges in Georgia's election racketeering case removed to federal court. Yeah, he's still one of the guys that wants to get moved to federal court as if that's going to make a fucking difference. Tell you what, if Mark Meadows didn't get it done, you ain't getting it done either, Jeffrey. It's funny about Jeffrey. I see him talking now and again. He seems so sure of himself. He seems kind of cocky. I hope he is able to maintain that attitude when he's in fucking prison, because he's no question going to prison. Now, the fact that he has no chance is the view of former federal prosecutor Ellie Honig, who explained to CNN's Wolf Blitzer on Monday why this case is even weaker than the removal bid by another associate of Donald Trump, Mark Meadows. Ellie Honig says Mark Meadows, who was Trump's White House chief of staff, lost his attempt to move his case to federal court, said Blitzer. Given that, does Jeffrey Clark have a realistic chance of getting his case moved to federal court? Well, Ellie Honig said this. Well, Wolf, I think Jeffrey Clark has an extraordinarily weak and problematic argument here. The core issue with Clark's argument, continued Honig, is that he has to prove he was acting in his scope as a senior DOJ official, but the job of any DOJ official is to investigate in good faith, find facts, and act accordingly. What Jeffrey Clark did is the opposite of that. He drafted a letter that wanted the DOJ to send to various states saying, we found evidence of substantial fraud. That is a complete fabrication of Jeffrey Clark, and certainly doesn't fall within his scope of his business. So indeed, if he was acting within his scope when he made up those facts and tried to get states to act on it, then that's a very dark day for the DOJ, and heaven help us all, Honig added. And I think Jeffrey Clark is going to lose this motion. Yeah, I don't think there's any question. If Mark Meadows didn't win, he certainly is not going to fucking win it. Now, an attorney for Donald Trump, Steve Sato, reportedly expressed concern on Monday as federal judge questioned lawyers for co-defendant Jeffrey Clark. U.S. District Judge Steve Jones presided over the hearing to determine if Clark's election interference trial could be moved to the Fulton County Superior Court in federal court. CNN correspondent Marshall Cohen reported Sato's remarks, which were shared on social media by Zachary Green. Trump's Georgia lawyer, Steve Sato, is in courtroom for today's hearing in Atlanta. Zachary Cohen wrote, at one point, Sato whispered, "This is not good," as the judge pressed Jeffrey Clark's attorney for answers about Clark's connection to Trump. He's not going to get it moved. Nobody's going to get it moved. And I said that a while back. It's a lame Hail Mary attempt to try to save themselves, but there's no way. These people have been caught red-handed. There's no way they're going to be out. Somebody else said about Mark Meadows trying to do all the things he's doing. There's no way you can out-lawyer crime. The facts are the facts. The evidence is the evidence. The witnesses are the witnesses. You can play all these games, but let's be honest, in the last 2.5, 3 years, Republicans have lost every attempt to try to create chaos or delay or distract or divert. They keep losing, and it's not getting better for them. They're going to continue to lose. Lastly, as we wind things down here, we talked about Lauren Boebert, representative, Republican from Colorado. We heard the story of how she went to this play, and she was sitting with her boyfriend at the time, and it got a little crazy. She was vaping, shouldn't have been doing that. She was dancing and singing, flailing her arms around, and then apparently she was in kind of a grope fest with her boyfriend. She denied it, of course, but then the video came out and it was pretty clear what was going on. And what you have to understand about Lauren Boebert, there are laws in the state of Colorado that she broke by doing what she was doing. And since it's on videotape, she could be implicated in some shit. Whether it will actually happen and the state decides to indict Lauren Boebert on this particular crime, I don't know. But it's possible. She could be culpable for this shit. Now, one of the things that came out about this boyfriend, a couple of things that came out about the boyfriend, is that first of all, he's a Democrat. Second of all, he owns a nightclub. And in this nightclub, he features drag shows, which seems ironic when you're dating this ultra religious figure in Lauren Boebert. But it's interesting. Lauren Boebert has broken it off with her companion to the musical Beetlejuice after more than a week of headlines surrounding the chaotic date, which resulted in the pair being escorted out of the theater. She said, all future date nights have been canceled, and I learned to check party affiliations before you go on a date. Lauren, we all knew he was a Democrat. We were talking about it. Are you saying that once it came out in the newspapers and on TV that you realized I had no idea it was a Democrat? Fuck you, you lying bitch. You just thought you could get away with anything, and that's what you did. Now, Monday, a reference to reports that her date, Quinn Gallagher, was a Democrat and that his bar had hosted drag shows. She continued, but all in all, it was mostly a lovely time. And, I've taken responsibility for my actions. Would love to know how the musical ended, and I encourage people to go see it. Nice one, Lauren. Let me see if a Democratic representative did exactly what you did, Lauren. Would you say, man, live and learn, we'll let it go and move on? No, you'd be all over their shit. And you know what? They're going to be all over your shit. You're a joke, you're a fool, and you're a danger to this country. And I hope they rake you over the coals over this. This is kind of a minor situation, an embarrassing situation, but we should take every opportunity to fucking bury Lauren Boebert. She is one of the biggest problems in the House of Representatives, and we need her fucking gone. At the very least, by 2024, when she's up for re-election, and her opponent, who's already out fundraised her and is doing better in the polls, buries her and sends her away. And it'll be interesting to see if she is culpable in any of the January 6th shit, because I think she is. That would be awesome. She loses her job and then she gets indicted. Got my fingers crossed for that one. She was asked about her comment on checking the political affiliation of the future dates. Boebert replied, well, TMZ, I'm pretty sure you told the world I went on a date with a Democrat. Yeah, they did. And the fact that you didn't know suggests you're pretty fucking stupid. She goes on to say he's a wonderful man, she added, a wonderful man that gropes his date in public in front of kids, but he's a wonderful guy. Now, had it been a Democrat, you would have said, oh, he's a groomer, he's a pedophile, he's a fuck you. You're going to get what you get, and you fucking deserve it. And it was a great time to go out, have dinner, enjoy part of the show. And yeah, now it's back to work here in Washington, D.C. What have you done in Washington, D.C., except trying to impeach Joe Biden and try to go after Hunter Biden? What policies, what bills have you passed to do any fucking good? You did nothing. You've done absolutely fucking nothing. She was pressed on whether her relationship with Gallagher was now over and whether the reports on his bar hosting drag shows had anything to do with it. Boebert said, nothing to do with anything anybody reported, but honestly, he's a private citizen. And we have peacefully parted at this time. Great man, great friend, and I wish him all the best. He's a private citizen, so we should leave him alone, keep him out of the papers. You mean like Hunter Biden? He's a private citizen. Keep that motherfucker out of the papers. Boebert and Gallagher were escorted out of the performance of Beetlejuice, the musical in Denver, after several audience members made complaints about Boebert's behavior. CCTV footage showed Boebert vaping in the theater, taking flash photographs, dancing, and getting extremely handsy with her date before she was asked to leave. Let's just say they both got to second base. I think that's what it would be. It's been a long time since I used that term, but at least second base on that date. And this is all while people are around them knowing who she is and kids around. That sounds pretty fucking bad for a woman who likes to call everybody else pedophiles and groomers. The Congresswoman found herself in even more hot water after her spokesperson denied that she had been vaping in the theater and blamed the smoke on a fog machine. Now, soon after the statement, CCTV footage showed Boebert blowing her vape smoke into members of the audience in front of her. Boebert apologized for her unacceptable behavior in a statement on Friday and blamed the incident on her public and difficult divorce. Oh, I'm getting divorced. Oh, that's the only reason I vaped in the theater. That's the only reason I talk shit to people in the theater. That's the only reason I had sexual contact with my date that day, because I'm having such a tough divorce. Fuck you, Lauren. You're looking for sympathy. After all you've done, after all you've said, nobody sympathizes with you, not even the Republican Party. They may not say it to your face, but I guarantee you they're going, we got to get rid of this bitch. She is nothing but a problem. All right. We're going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.